book of Exodus begins with the people of Israel who are living in Egypt experiencing a miraculous and providential explosion in population. They multiply, they teem, they grow exceedingly strong. And the drama of the book, at least the first half of the book, is centered around the fact that the Egyptians misinterpret this blessing of God upon Israel as a potential threat, as a curse upon them. And so Pharaoh, the king of the Egyptians, tries to limit or eliminate this potential threat by hatching a series of plots to try to bring down the Hebrews, which is the name for the Israelites that the Egyptians used. And what we see over these two chapters, the first two chapters of Exodus, is that God overcomes all of these various plans and schemes of Pharaoh. But what is significant to me is the means by which God frustrates these plans, or the agents in particular that God uses to bring down the will of Pharaoh. Now, Pharaoh was the most powerful man, or at least one of the most powerful men in the world during the time of the events of this story. He's not only a king and a ruler, he is seen as a god. He is worshipped among the pantheon of Egypt. And so what he said goes. What he does cannot be overcome. This is the way that the world around him saw Pharaoh, especially the Egyptians. And so what he begins doing is he first enslaves the Israelites. He forces them to undergo extremely cruel, hard labor in hopes that that will kind of put a damper on their productivity or their procreation. And that doesn't work. God continues to bless them and they continue to multiply. And so at that point, Pharaoh again begins hatching out these more elaborate schemes. And in each scenario, a woman or a couple of women or a group of women rise up and they bring down the most powerful man in the world. First, it's a group of midwives. Two midwives are named in particular, Shiphrah and Puah. Pharaoh comes to them and orders them to kill any Hebrew male child that they help deliver. Now, we don't even know if these midwives are Egyptian or Hebrew. The phrase in the text is somewhat ambiguous. It could be translated that they are Hebrew midwives. It equally could be translated that they are the midwives of the Hebrews. And so we don't really know much about them other than the fact that they choose to stand up against this decree, and the motivation that is given in the text is that because they fear God and that they have care for and they have compassion upon these infants, these children, these babies, that they allow them to live. And Pharaoh, of course, is furious, and he asks why they aren't complying with his demands, his commands. And they even go to the length of spinning this kind of elaborate, humorous tale that they tell him. They say, oh, well, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. You know, they're vigorous, they're full of life and vitality, so that by the time we arrive at their house to help with the birth, they're already done and they're off working in the fields again, and we've lost them. So sorry, we just couldn't help you out. And despite this being a lie and a deception, God honors their actions. And in fact, the first explicitly stated action of God that is explicitly ascribed to God in the book of Exodus is at the end of chapter 1, where he blesses these women and he gives them households of their own because they fear him and because they cared for his chosen people. Well, Pharaoh responds to this frustration of his plan by spreading the responsibility. He goes to all the Egyptians and gives an edict that if anyone sees a Hebrew male child under a certain age, they are allowed to simply throw it into the Nile and to kill it. And this, of course, brings a high and large degree of suffering and trauma upon the Israelites. But once again, God overcomes this plot of Pharaoh, and this time it is through the agency of another woman, a Hebrew slave, Moses' mother, who cares for Moses, who hides him after giving birth to him for a couple months, until she's no longer able to conceal his presence. And think about it, she's vulnerable, she's probably exhausted, she's already a slave, now she's given birth, she's caring for, feeding, nursing a child, trying to hide him, and finally she's forced to this last-ditch effort to try to save him. She places him in a basket, places the basket in the Nile, basically placing him in the hands of God. And who should find this basket but the last person that you would think you would want to find this basket? Pharaoh's own daughter is the one who discovers this child. And yet, ironically and surprisingly, she too, even Pharaoh's own daughter, chooses to rebel against Pharaoh's wish. She has compassion on the child, she takes him as her own, and she raises him in the palace. So what is significant to me about these couple chapters is not only, of course, that God is able to overcome even the plans and the plots of the most powerful forces on earth, but it's the means by which he does it. Now, within these various women, there is still a degree of diversity. You have ethnic diversity. Pharaoh's daughter is Egyptian, Moses' mother is an Israelite. The midwives, we don't even know whether they're Hebrew or Egyptian or something else, right? We have a diversity in socioeconomic status. Pharaoh's daughter is obviously of the upper echelons of society. She is of the elite. The midwives, probably somewhere in the middle. We don't know if they're Hebrews, they're slaves, but if they're something else, they probably are just some sort of trade class. But of course, undoubtedly, Moses' mother is a slave. She's of the lowest rung of the socioeconomic ladder. And yet, it does not matter in what situation or circumstances they find themselves. Because they fear God, or because they have compassion upon the helpless and the needy, God is not only willing but able to use them to once again bring down the intentions and the plots of the most powerful agents in the world, or the most powerful force in the world, the most powerful man in the world. And I think the same is true today. I don't know if you've ever asked yourself, can God really use me? Can God really use me to affect change in this world, to bring about good in this world, to save somebody, to bring positive change in somebody else's life? And you might ask those questions because of the way that culture thinks about you, or the way that people have said things about you. Maybe it's because of your gender or because of your ethnicity. But God is able and willing to use anyone and everyone, indeed excited to use, especially often excited to use the people we would least expect to bring about the salvation of a people. So whether male or female, rich or poor, powerful or powerless, in whatever circumstances you find yourself today, if you've ever asked yourself, can God use me? The first couple chapters of Exodus at least reflect and reveal to us that the answer to that question is undoubtedly yes. God is able, God is willing, God is excited to use you to bring about the salvation and well-being of the world around you.